Sonic Roboblast 2, or SRB2 for short, is a Doom mod that's the sequel to Sonic Roboblast, a 1998 Sonic fan game. SRB2 began development as SRB2 TGF. This version was more akin to the original Sonic Roboblast, but had more detailed graphics and scrolling levels. The next version of SRB2 was actually the first version to be a modified Doom Legacy, and was called SRB2 Halloween due to being released in October of 1999. This version still retained many elements of Doom, which even included some of Doom's UI. The next notable release was SRB2 Christmas, which had its final build released in September of 2000. This version added many things like the Thawk, multiplayer, and even Tails. And in this version, the Thawk could be performed multiple times while you were in the air. The next versions were released throughout the 2000s and were the various demos of the game that added things like a proper title screen, Knuckles, more stages, and lots more. Although the actual quality of these demos was arguably bad. For example, Greenflower Zone had extremely poor level design throughout all of the demos, as well as the mouse being basically impossible to use with default settings. The next versions of the game were 2.0 and 2.1, which were released in 2009 and 2014 respectively. These were the first versions of the game that weren't demos, and expanded upon the demos that had come before. But these versions felt like betas in comparison to SRB 2.2, which is the most recent and the best version of the game, and it's the one we'll be reviewing in this video. So let's begin. The game's story takes place months after the original Sonic Roboblast. Dr. Eggman begins harnessing the power of a black rock that appears every 5 years. Eggman begins targeting Greenflower Mountain. Sonic is on vacation and is quickly alerted that Eggman has returned. Sonic rushes towards Greenflower Mountain but quickly realizes that it's already been defaced and so sets out to defeat Eggman. We start out in Greenflower Zone, and it's immediately apparent how fun this game is to control. Abilities like Sonic's Thawk are so fun to use, and it's super easy to build up momentum, but it's also as easy to lose it. Greenflower Act 1 is a great opening act due to the amount of free space that you have. This free space allows you to experiment with the game's mechanics. It reminds me a lot of the hub area of Mario 64, which offers a similar amount of free space that allows you to experiment with the game's mechanics. Anyways, Greenflower Act 2 expands on Greenflower Act 1 by being an act with much larger scale. There are tons of different areas to explore as well as different items to collect, including these tokens which bring you to the game's special stages, which are just nights into dream stages. I personally don't enjoy these stages all too much, but I could see why somebody else could like it. Your reward for getting all the Chaos Emeralds in the special stages is of course Super Sonic. I think he's a neat reward as always, but I feel like he should be a little more overpowered. Like given the ability to fly or break through the walls that lead to Knuckles' paths in the various levels. Anyways, after Greenflower 1 and 2, we get to the boss, which is against Dr. Eggman. This boss has two phases, one where Dr. Eggman shoots out one laser, and another where he shoots out 3. It's a pretty easy fight, and it's probably as difficult to say the first boss from Sonic 2. And with that, we've beaten Greenflower, and we get to Techno Hill Zone. In my opinion, this stage looks a little too much like Greenflower. Now obviously it has different mechanics, but the stage really just does look like Greenflower. Hell, in some earlier demos, this stage was just Greenflower with poison added. I personally like Act 2 much more than Act 1, due to taking the industrial theme of this stage more seriously, but I don't like how confusing the mechanic of purple water is. So if you jump into the purple water, you'll quickly float to the top, but this is never explained to you. And this brings up one of my main problems with the game, how cryptic it can be at sometimes. You often don't know what direction you should be going, and I think that a hint system or some signs would help a lot. And another thing about the purple water, it's heavily utilized in Act 2, while Act 2 has it, but it's really not used at all. I think that Act 1 should introduce it in a safer environment, while Act 2 cranks up the difficulty and uses the purple water in unique ways, which is what Act 2 does. Anyways, this stage's boss is against Dr. Eggman, and it's another pretty easy boss. Like Greenflower's boss, it has two phases. In both, Dr. Eggman shoots out this blue goop, but in the second phase, his movements are much more sporadic and uses a pogo stick type thing to move around as opposed to the first phase where he floats around. Anyways, the next zone is Deep Sea Zone, one of my least favorite levels in the game. It really doesn't have any standout mechanics and is honestly kind of forgettable. The boss, though, is probably the best part of the stage. After hitting the boss a couple of times, it splits into 3. it's pretty easy to guess which is the actual boss that you should be hitting, but at least it's not a complete guessing game. Next up is Castle Eggman Zone, and on a first playthrough, this stage is pretty hard. It definitely increases the difficulty a lot compared to the previous levels. On a second playthrough, I didn't have much trouble with this level besides the bridge area and the boss. Both were pretty difficult for me, even on a second playthrough, and both felt unfairly difficult. After Castle Eggman Zone comes Arid Canyon, a pretty fun yet challenging level. It is pretty cryptic during some areas of the level, but it's a pretty fun level all things considered. But the boss is not fun. This boss is against Fang the Sniper, and my biggest problem is how during the second phase, you can easily be knocked off the stage. But you do unlock Fang as a playable character afterwards, so I guess it's worth it. Oh yeah, I should probably talk about the playable characters. There's Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, as well as 3 unlockable characters, Fang, Metal Sonic, and Amy. Each of them have a special ability. Sonic's is the Air Dash, or the Thok as it's called in-game. Tails' ability is Flight, Knuckles can glide and climb, Fang can use his pop gun and balance, Metal Sonic can hover, and Amy can use her Pico Pico hammer. Anyways, the next zone is Red Volcano Zone, if you can even call it a zone considering it's only one act at the time of writing this. It is a pretty difficult act all things considered. The same can be said for Egg Rock. It's a pretty difficult zone, especially Act 1. And that brings us to the final zone, Black Core Zone, a 3-act zone with 3 different bosses. 2 against Metal Sonic, with the 3rd being the final boss. The first boss against Metal Sonic is a race, and on my first playthrough, I had a lot of difficulty with this boss. The main reason being that during the race, there is a platforming section that can be cheesed with characters that can fly, but if you're playing as Sonic, this part really breaks up the pace and it's really annoying. And the second Metal Sonic boss is pretty annoying. You have to hit him 7 times while you're in an arena that you can easily be knocked out of. And then there's the final boss, which is a pretty good final boss, until you get to the part where you can be knocked out of the arena. Another fun thing about this game is the multiplayer. In a multiplayer server, there are 8 different game types: co-op, competition, race, match, team match, tag, hide and seek, and capture the flag. Each of these different modes is tons of fun, especially with friends. And that's basically all of what SRB2 has to offer. If you're just talking about vanilla SRB2, because this game has a huge modding community. There are tons of great mods that add things like custom stages, characters, the works. There's even a mod called SRB2 Kart, which turns SRB2 into a kart racer. I personally don't like it very much, but I do see the appeal of it. Anyways, non-modded SRB2 is a great game. It has a great story mode, great multiplayer, great music which you've been hearing throughout this entire video, and even more on the way. So overall, I give SRB2 an 8.5 out of 10.